So that idea of having the downside is a very important way that I approach all business decisions now, including business continuity. We always say if things go belly up, we need to be in a position where we are left whole. And also when you're an investor, always making sure to shore up, to always cash out from time to time, right? So just that, when we talk about diversification, it's an important part.
CTA, Dr. Laila, video 8.
I am really enjoying this one. Sometimes I do things for you guys, sometimes I do them for myself. This one is for me. So much information, but if it's for me, that means it's also for you. So go back and watch this thing with a pen and pad. Now, I am in the interview. I have to actually sit back and watch this thing as a viewer, because I don't know, I want to rewatch it just so that I can rewrite the nuggets that you're dropping. So 2000 and post-election violence, I would say 2008. That's that period. 2007 elections into the madness. How does it affect you? Because you said you had a story.
Yeah, so I learned a lot about business from that period because, I've given you the context. I even came home at a time when there was quite euphoria. It was a very euphoric time in the environment, and the real estate market really started picking up, and we had even reached this, mythical 7% growth rate. And in my mind, because I was part of the optimism, was this idea that, we'll have this election, and then after that, now we'll start moving towards that 10% of Vision 2030, right? So there's this idea of we're just in the way. And I remember saying to somebody, because it was December of 2007, that I wish these politicians would finish with their election so that the rest of us can get back to work. So that was the kind of utopia. Attitude that I had about politics, which now this process really humbled me. So there was a couple of things happening. So as I explained with Sci and Real, what we had started doing is we had started to structure projects. So we said one was doing work for government, and policy areas around real estate. Another one was feasibility studies and helping investors make decisions about politics. And this other, about investment. And the other one was this idea about these mega cities, right? So to help investors in Konza and along these urban nodes in Nairobi County. But the other thing we started to do was to structure projects. So the idea, in fact, when we were talking about REITs, one of the things that came to mind is sometimes it sounds complicated, but a thing that can help people understand is to think of a chama, where you pull your money together and then you put it into a project. So a development REIT is you've pulled your money together, you've put it to build something which you will then sell or lease out. And then an income REIT is something where you put money together, and you get the rental income from a business. But a chama is the way to think about it.
I love what you're saying, because some people may not, the reason why I stopped you on REIT is because people may not understand you can buy a part of a building.
That's right.
Because people think like, REIT is a vehicle that allows you to buy a share of a building.
That's right. That's right. And then when the return comes, you get the share proportionate to what you have.
And what I'm hearing you say, some of them are made to sell this, and then you get your proportion of that. Others are made now, you start renting this, and
you're getting the income. Exactly. So the other service that we were giving as Sci and Real is to find a project that is at a good location. You actually purchase it and you structure a project so that people are able then to invest in it. So we had just started our first project from that idea, but we started just before the election. And we said, what we're going to do is we're going to get land, and then we'll get investors to come in, we'll build together and all of that. So it could have gone very well in theory, except...
Could have. Tells us what happened.
Except the problem with the way the election went is that it then affected many things after that. So you can imagine we close in December, we've just put a deposit down to buy a plot of land, and then we were going to come, and we had investors lined up, very many investors lined up, who are going to come and help us build this development so we do it all together. We come back, some investors stop picking your calls.
Are these local investors, local and international?
It was a mix, but mostly local, And then after that, the interest rates really start going up in a very short period of time because of all this uncertainty. The inflation in the housing market goes up. So the cost that you had projected for the building and the housing price now become a mismatch. Because remember, when people have uncertainty, they're saying we're not going to pay more now. Our incomes are going down, we're uncertain, but the housing prices are really rallying. So now you have a house where the margin is very little, right? Assuming you can there'll be even offtake, right? Depending. So for several months now we're trying, and in fact—
Can I ask, where is this parcel of land that you bought?
It's in Athi River.
Okay.
It's in Athi River. So now what happens is that there's a number of different dynamics that kick in. So one, we want to save the economy because we're also Kenyans. So it's true my project is here and it might be affected, but the first thing I want to do is to help, because I'm in MPESA and all of us are working, including in a group I was part on called the Citizens Pathway Group, to try and make sure that we help broker a solution for Kenya. Right, so there's a lot of work happening there with other communities. So KEPSA's involved. There's, Citizens for Peace. There's a lot of, and we're all meeting to help with this situation, right? Because we're not going to talk about business if there's no Kenya, right?
A few chapters back, a few episodes back, you said business is the solution to a country. Business is now being affected by the political environment.
That's right.
So business is stepping up under this board called KEPSA and a few other organizations to bring peace. And I need to say it
That's exactly what happened.
Between Raila and Kibaki.
Yes, that's what we did.
You guys are affecting the livelihoods of Kenya.
Everybody. Yes. We need to do better.
Business environment extremely hell. That you guys have stepped up into brokering a peace deal.
Yes, and there was also, brokering, I think that's correct. I think it's accurate. I'll own it.
In line with Kofi Annan.
Yes, exactly. So that whole group of people, and there was many different, I would say, not factions, but we were all meeting very regularly to exchange notes and to harmonize our position as we worked with the politicians, because we really wanted to support them to be able to get to the other side of this thing, because they were also not sleeping, right? Nobody was at peace. So through that, we used I had done a lot of negotiation studies. So really, we ran simulations. We talked about interest, what could be driving the hardliners on both sides of this situation. And we all worked together to get to a point where we resolved the situation, but it wasn't for at least 2 months.
Okay.
So that had a terrible impact on business. On my column, at that time I had the column for 4 years, where I was writing on real estate and urban life. At that time, I changed to talking about nation building. So I started talking about moderation in politics, about the power of dialogue, so the column changed completely.
Wow.
And I did notice some of the readers saying, no, we understand, right? Like this is what we need to be talking about right now. Yeah, so after that, but what I learned from that from a business point of view, one is humility around politics. It's true that business is what is going to drive our economies forward, and that government plays a facilitative role, but politics can grind everything down to a halt. So I started to really respect the political side of things and to really not see it as something apart. And instead, because I used to look at the government side from a policy point of view, but I really tried to avoid the electoral politics side. Politics, with a P, right?
Yes.
And now with a big P, but now I've gotten to a point where you really do need to engage, and you need to take an interest in who the leaders are, who is choosing them, why, what their platform is, and what they're coming to offer you. So that's one. The second thing I learned from a business point of view was really about looking at the downside. So when you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're a visionary, you can be the kind of person who just sees how good things are going to be. But really understanding how risk works and being able to quantify those risks, not in a table somewhere where you tick off boxes, but really understanding this risk, if it happens and everything is thrown down to the zero, what will I do and will I be ready for that? So that idea of having the downside is a very important way that I approach all business decisions now, including business continuity. We always say if things go belly up, we need to be in a position where we are left whole. And also when you're an investor, always making sure to shore up, to always cash out from time to time, right? So just that, when we talk about diversification, it's an important part. There's a book I really love that's called... it's black. I just think because it has such a funny title, but it's about the downside entirely. I'll come back to it. But it's exactly this concept that many people have made money, and it's a lot of money. But the trick is who has kept it. Because you'll find people who will tell you that they've gone to the top of the mountain, they've made billions, but if you look at what's left today, it's almost nothing. So how do you really get to people thinking about, at the end of the day, it's what I'm left with, and what do I have to do in order to be able to come out and say that business was worth it? But if you don't pay yourself first, all of these different principles are really important for it to have been worth it.
At the real estate business,
Unreal.
Richard Unreal. Were you profitable? Did it?
It was profitable, but I didn't pay myself like I should have. I think that's what I would say, right? So it's one of the things that business owners do a lot is pay others first, which sometimes is natural. You're a channel of money. It comes through and out. That one I have learned, we don't do that anymore, right? So you really make sure that the business has to rise to the level where it loves you back. That's the joke we give, right? So I love my business, but does it love me back? That's really important.
So did this one love you back? It didn't. It loved the other guys.
Yeah, I think it loved the other people more. But since then, things are better now, I've learned. So but the idea was about the downside.
In that time, from that business.
Yes. And since then, I've been very particular about making sure that you think about downside. Don't assume good times are just going to last. And one of the ways that you manifest being in that kind of Pollyanna mindset is by not paying, because you think the future will be better, the future will be better. But saying, pay me now, and even if it's a bit, I'm not saying take everything out and leave the building the business undercapitalized, but just that discipline of making sure that you're measuring your return from time to time.
And what's the balance between that? Because you've got this concept, you've got this idea, and this idea sort of needs time before it begins to generate revenue. Enough to pay you back, because you need additional personnel in the business, so that you're not so that it gets to the point where it breaks even, at least, So how would you say, what would you advise somebody from that balance, so that somebody is not starting a business now and the first thing that they're writing there is a check for themselves for 100 Gs and invest in zero bob back in the business, but they're like, she said pay me fast. She said pay yourself fast.
That's a great question, because there has to be a balance. When you seed something, I would say give yourself a year. Why I say, and the best businesses are even a different kind. They're literally a business, there's different business models. If you can get into something where from day one you're profitable, that's a better way. And you have many options of businesses. A lot of us choose businesses because it's an idea. But what if you chose a business because it can support you from day one? And there's different things that have negative working capital that allow you to be paid as soon as you give the person. Like, let's say DSTV, for example. If you're a DSTV subscriber, if you haven't paid, they turn you off. Right? As opposed to businesses like real estate development, where you've built the building, you've borrowed, so now the interest rates are running, and before you get paid, you have to go through the land's office, get the title deed, pay everybody back, and then that's when you get paid. Now, that's a very risky business, because it means you're the one who's exposed and you're carrying the risk for everybody. But there's other business formats that you can choose specifically because they're not like that. So I always encourage people, when you're going into business, let's leave this culture of I'm going into something for creative expression. And if you're going in because it's a business, choose something that will actually pay you and pay for you, right? Give you a return. If you're going into something for creative expression, then go in for creative expression. But if you're looking for something that gives you the best return on your time, it might not be the one you thought about at first. You might have to be more strategic.
I also loved what you said about exiting at different stages. So, exiting in tranches. So being like, I'm not going to wait for you to sell you know what I mean?
To sell the business to get some money back.
So have you done that in terms of investing, and then said, okay, after this period I want this, after this I want this?
But one thing that could be a good start is just to pay a salary. If you could just pay yourself a market rate salary. Like, start with 50% of what I would make if I walked away from this business and went and got a job. 50% of that. then try and get to a point where you're paying yourself what you would be. Because remember, it's you doing this work. Yeah, so at least I should be in this business as opposed to that other place. Then from there, you can move on to now the dividends. Or let's say for every year I've been in this business, I want to get a 10% return on let's say 10% of revenue or 5% of revenue should come back to me eventually. That could be the next step, right? But as a start, if you could get into the discipline of paying yourself, that founders find that very, very difficult. And if you do that, it helps shift not just your mentality, but the mentality of the people you're working with, where you stop being seen as a kind of, a bank.
Jesus. You are Jesus.
Yeah, but if it's working, it's not that the instinct is bad, right? It's just that what it's telling you is you might not be in the right business. So I'm not trying to say that it's a bad instinct to take care of the people that work for you or to take some sacrifice. But what we don't want you is to be 8 years later and you're like, I've never made any money. That's 8 years of my life. I was energetic, now I don't feel like that. We really want to change that around so that we have vibrant, real businesses. And there's some studies that have been done. There's something called the illusions of entrepreneurship that talks about, if you compare, in that particular study, I don't know if it applies in every country all the time, but in this particular case, they looked at the people who were running businesses and they compared it with people who had stayed in employment. They found the people who were in employment were making more. They also had benefits. They had less stress. So net, at the end of the day, it felt like for some people, it's a better choice to stay in employment. Also, the people who had left employment to do these entrepreneurial projects had done it in a half, like they were upset at their boss and they left in a half and they, it was really a spur of the moment thing. Whereas there could be a more strategic way to decide how to go into business. They also found that most people leave business and then go to, because it's the field you go to now compete with your employer, your past employer. So some of these things, there's ways to approach it so that if you're going into business, we help you think about it in a more strategic way so that you go into a business that loves you from day one. That's what I would wish. That's what I would wish for people.
I really, but you're speaking to me in ways that you don't even know. My first business, wow, it didn't uplift me at all, even though we called it FOAP.
And it can be sad.
But
you can be having an impact on people.
Looking at the revenues that you're making, and everybody else is happy.
Is doing okay.
Everyone else gets excited on 25th.
Yeah, but
you get stressed.
Yeah.
But also, I came to learn later on with the next one that sometimes the pressure of me paying myself first forces me to step up even more to ensure that revenue is catered for.
Coming in.
Yeah.
But I also say, there's a book called Quit.
Get out.
We need to learn that sometimes it's okay to walk away, right? But when you know that and when it's wise, and one of the points they make is really that whenever you quit, it sometimes feels too early. When really it's just on time, because you want to keep going, but sometimes it's the right time. So I'm not saying that you quit every time adversity comes, but sometimes it's the right time to say, this thing is not working. It's not giving me what I expected. Accept that you made a mistake, which is the hardest part, they say, in the human ego, and then go to something that treats you better.
Oh, it's a human ego.
Oh, we have a problem. Once we set on a course to accept I made this mistake and to pull back, we have a problem with that.
You also said something in the beginning of this whole conversation that leadership is not for everyone. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone.
It's not at all.
And entrepreneurship in an essence is leadership.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had this, first of all, did that column do anything for you?
Yes, that's why I like to say that you can eat exposure.
You can what?
You can eat exposure. Now, there's a very common thing saying you can't eat exposure. How are you paid exposure? Then everybody laughs. Because there's this idea, especially if you're a young person, that you shouldn't work for free.